Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Christopher Lee, and we have 15 minutes to talk about technology, specifically around assistive technology. This is going to be a case study. So each of these individuals will have a few minutes to talk about their experience around assistive technology. I want to keep in mind when we're talking about assistive technology, it's not just technology like screen readers or voice recognition or AAC devices, but we're actually talking about the holistic picture of assistive technology. So that includes services, training, maintaining the technology, and ensuring people can get the technology. So as you listen to these case studies of individuals with their successes around technology, you also may hear some of their frustration around technology. And we know technology can be expensive. We know that AAC devices, prior to some of the apps out there, could run anywhere from $6,000 to $8,000 US, which is outrageous. We know how expensive some of the screen readers are out there. So it's important that we think about it holistically, and when we listen and hopefully have some time to ask some questions, if we do, that you bring those issues into the picture, because you can throw technology at anybody, but if you don't have those supported services around you, there's a good chance that technology will not be embedded in that individual to use in their daily lives. And I have a good example. A colleague of mine, someone that works with me who's from Lebanon, is blind. He has a Ph.D. and he's not overly technically savvy. And he has struggled learning the technology, and to find trainers to help him learn the technology has been very difficult, specifically during COVID times. So there's a lot of areas that we need to touch with assistive technology. So I'm going to open it up now and have the case study session. And I've got my folks behind me who I've not met yet. So this is like brand new. I think Christy, where's Christy? I've met Christy. Hello, Christy. I'm Christopher. And where is Lebohang? Lebohang, nice to meet you. And Baguette? Or Karen? Okay. And Wilson? All right, so we got almost everyone here. So we're going to start off, and we're going to start with Wilson, and we'll just go straight down. Wilson, tell us a little bit about some of the struggles and successes that you've had around technology.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. So my name is Wilson Macharia, a black male in his late 20s, and I'm also visually impaired. As I share my experiences, I'll focus more on access to justice as I have been requested. So why would I talk about access to justice? The reason is, as a visually impaired person, in other terms blind, I am an advocate of the High Court, which means that I help or should help other people access justice in the justice sector. But secondly, as a person with visual impairment, I have been denied certain rights in which I should access from the law courts or other justice sector platforms. And I have successfully done that, as you would find on a quick search on Google. But persons with disabilities generally face certain barriers in accessing the justice system. These barriers include the inaccessible physical environment in which the justice sector is located on, negative attitudes by people who work within that justice sector, and also lack of knowledge on how to accommodate persons with disabilities. And then many people would ask then, what would be the linkage of digital inclusion and persons with disabilities, especially in the justice sector? There's a quote that is not so common, I would assume it's very common in this room, that for persons without disabilities, technology makes things easier, but for persons with disabilities, technology makes things possible, right? Increasingly, justice institutions have adapted the use of technology in the justice sector. This was very common, especially during the time of COVID-19. I personally, when I was a petitioner in a certain case here in Kenya, we'd made all the proceedings online, virtually, in an inaccessible platform. But what many people forget is that seeking justice does not begin from attending court. It begins from making that phone call to report a dispute, or even as a victim, for instance, gender-based violence, which many persons with disabilities face. If these technologies that we use are not accessible, then that means that the barriers to access to justice are brought closer to the homes of persons with disabilities, because they no longer have to go to court or to the police station to report these cases, but still they cannot access the platforms which have been designed to aid in this process. I'm going to conclude with a question: how can we then improve or leverage technology to enhance access to justice for persons with disabilities, for the interest of time? The first one is including persons with disabilities while designing the technologies that are used. And I believe we have many designers in this room. And then we are often asked the question, how do we make these technologies accessible? And as a person with disability, and I'm sure most of you would agree with me, that is one of the most difficult questions that we are asked. How do we make these accessible or inclusive? Imagine going to a doctor to seek a service, and they ask you, how should I treat you? Isn't that sad? Fortunately, today, we have been given a foundation which can help us ensure that all the devices that are designed, or websites, or applications, or platforms used in different ways, including in justice system, are accessible. And if I was confident and bold yesterday, claiming for accessibility in technology, then I'll be even bolder as a person with disability from today, because I know I have been given a tool that I can refer to when asked the question, why? Thank you.
So Wilson, I've got a follow-up question. Thank you very much for your comments. Spot on. And you're carrying right now a Braille reader.
Yes.
And Braille readers are not very expensive,
Yes.
and we know that.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little about funding options or some thoughts around how do people who can't afford to get a Braille reader get a Braille reader?
Thanks. So as you said correctly, I'm using a device called a Braille Not Touch. Haba and Germa said there are many devices. And this is one of the devices which we would call inclusive, accessible, and a model of universal design. Why do I say that? Because as you can see, those of you who have sight, the device has a screen, which means anybody using print can read, but it also has a Braille display on the bottom for someone who's visually impaired or deaf-blind. That therefore means that when I type something in Braille, you who's sighted can be able to see what I've typed. And if you type something in print, I can be able to see it using Braille. Unfortunately, that device cost $6,000 at the time of purchase. In fact, I tell the people who helped me get it that you're so lucky you didn't give me that money, because as a young person, I would have gone to buy a car, right? But for me, a number of lawyers came together and surprised me with this device because I had the knowledge. So the first way of accessing such devices would be for persons with disabilities to access information on the availability of the devices, because it is through that people who are around us, our employers, our colleagues, can know what ways they can accommodate us. And then secondly, we would also need some form of subsidy with accessing such devices, including tax incentives, and also assisting or growing the organizations such as Enable, which help to enhance access to such devices.
Thank you, Wilson. I have so many other questions. Like one of them would be STEM-related content. However, we'll move from this and we'll go on to Karen. Karen, do you want to just spend a little bit? Grab this from me, thank you.
I will describe myself. I'm a Black woman. I'm wearing a blue cardigan and a navy blue and white dress, and I have black curly dreadlocks. One of my successes with technology for me as an autistic person is I use it to just advocate for myself and also reach out to as many people as possible using especially social media. And social media for me is like my medium. I use that to just, type what's in my mind and in my head. And I get as many followers as possible. You can imagine how many followers I have, especially on Twitter, especially from all over the world, even outside Kenya. I have many people who really follow me and follow my content, whatever content I put on social media. However, the barriers, when it comes to posting stuff, you get such unknown messages like, you don't trust anybody. You get really scared, and I get very anxious when I'm typing something, when somebody just, I'm a known source, and you don't know that person, and they're coming to your DM saying, hi, I want to know you. I've met people like such, and I'm forced to block that person, sending inappropriate pictures that makes my vulnerability, especially as an autistic woman. And I can tell you, autistic women are highly, very susceptible to gender-based violence. Now, in this case, women with disabilities, they're very high risk of being abused. So for me, that's one of the barriers, to face, somebody just coming to your DM and wanting to, certain things that I wish I would discuss, but not at this forum. But other than that, I'm happy that I'm able to use technology to reach a wider audience, and also to reach to as many autistic people who are not able to use the same technology, just like non-autistic people do. I serve on the board of Differently Talented Society of Kenya, where I'm the organizing secretary. So I use that to organize events and also create support groups for parents of autistic children using my social media platform, and help as many parents of autistic children and actual autistic adults themselves to just join a community where they can just get to know each other and just build a whole community. Thank you.
Wow. Karen, that was very powerful, and you bring up a very sensitive topic, and I can tell it's a very emotional place that you go, and I'm so glad that you are creating communities to address issues that you've just stated. Let me just drill down a little bit more with you. Which social media do you use? Which platforms do you use mostly? And was it difficult to get training in those, or did it was something that you picked up pretty quickly?
I use Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. I just learned from people who are around me. I just learned how to navigate through those social media platforms, and also the latest being WhatsApp. So I just also text anybody that is around. So I didn't have prior training to using social media, to using those social media platforms that I've just mentioned above, but I'm just happy to at least use that to my knowledge, and I'm just happy about that.
Thank you for that very much. Okay, so next we have Christy. Christy, tell us a little bit about your story and what you use in regards to technology, some of the challenges and some of the successes that you've found.
Thank you so much. So I'll start by describing myself. I'm a Black woman sitting in a wheelchair, and I'm wearing a dark blue jacket with a white blouse. So when I was growing up, I used to see people with disabilities as beggars on the streets. And when I injured my spine, and doctors told me that I would not be able to walk again, I started crying because I thought that was the end of me and I was going to join those people with disabilities who are begging on the streets. However, when I got the opportunity to go back to school, it wasn't easy for me to access the physical buildings like classes, the science lab, the library. I was depending on my fellow students to lift me to access those buildings because they had stairs. I graduated with a degree in information and communication technology and later with a master's in public policy and governance. And then time for me to look for a job came. I was invited for interviews with 3 different international organizations in my country. At the first organization, I did interviews right in front of the reception, but interviews were happening in the second floor of that building. But the building did not have an access for a wheelchair user. So the organizers of the interview had to take banners and create a room which was hiding me from people that were walking in and out of the reception. At a second international organization, interviews were again happening at a second floor of a building, and the only difference with that organization was that they had to ask watchmen to lift me in my wheelchair to the second floor to attend the interviews. At the third organization, it was the same thing. I did interviews right in front of the reception. Before I heard the outcome of those interviews, I knew that I had failed because I knew those organizations would not just modify their entire buildings just that I should go and work for them. And yes, I was right. I was never invited to work for them. Esteemed guests and participants, this is not just my experience. It's the experience of a lot of young people with disabilities across Africa that do not have access to education, they don't have access to employment, and they don't have access to other services like health services and so on and so forth. You can recall that in 2019, COVID-19 hit, and a lot of countries introduced online learning. But online learning wasn't accessible to learners with various disabilities, such as the blind, the deaf, and the deafblind, because they didn't have access to technology. The digital divide that exists between developing countries and the developed countries worsened online access for these classes for learners with disabilities. So you can see that there are so many challenges that persons with disabilities are facing across Africa. In Malawi, we have one organization that is providing medical rehabilitation and assistive technologies to persons with disabilities, and it is heavily underfunded. So you can imagine that they don't reach to all persons with disabilities that need assistive technology. Ladies and gentlemen, having access to technology or assistive technology and being able to use this assistive technology to access services, to access products, and to access the physical space is a different thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Christy. Your point about the digital divide is so important, and we know that some countries have much more resources than other countries. And in the short time I spent with you, I heard that. I know your organization that you work for is working towards changing that. Can you speak briefly about what you're doing in regards to that?
Yes. So the organization that I work for, the Disability Rights Fund, provides funding to different organizations of persons with disabilities in my country to be able to advocate for issues like changing of policies, to be able to advocate for issues like inclusion of persons with disabilities in different services that the organization is, the government is providing, such as maybe the social cash transfer, digital accessibility, access to assistive technologies, and so on and so forth.
Or do you have loan libraries or places that people can go and try before they buy assistive technology?
No. We don't have any libraries in my country where people can go and buy assistive technologies. So it's all about going online and searching, and then it also goes back to, that digital divide. Yep. People don't have access to, for example, smartphones. They don't have access to, for example, reliable internet. So it's always a challenge.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Lebohang, you want to spend a little bit of time telling us your story?
Yes, thank you so much for the opportunity. My name is Lebohang Monyatsi. I come from South Africa. I'm a wheelchair user, brown in complexion, and wearing all black. Growing up as a person with disability, I experienced so many challenges, but the major one was accessibility to infrastructure and transportation. And to be honest, I'm still experiencing those challenges. However, due to assistive technology, things have been better or much easier. Speaking from personal experience, for example, let's say I have a meeting or interviews, I can just zoom in or use alternative methods instead of me going out and experience places that I cannot access. I can connect with people sitting at my own comfort zone. Yeah, and also when it comes to transportation, I can use my mobile phone to request an Uber to come if need be, you know, because in my country, public transportation is a hassle when you using a wheelchair, especially. I can remember there was this instance, so many instances actually, where I wanted to use the public transport. Sometimes it will just pass me by because I'm in a wheelchair. Some other time, passengers will complain saying, I'm filling up the space and whatnot. So with the assistive devices, things are much easier, and I'm so grateful. Also, my wheelchair, ladies and gentlemen, it enables me to do so many things. Without it, I wouldn't be able to perform tasks, or I'll find it very difficult to perform certain tasks. I value it and I'm grateful for it. Excuse me. In conclusion, I would say due to the assistive technology, myself and other persons with disabilities have an opportunity to more positive and easy lifestyle, which include more participation to society. So I'm hoping that this conference will motivate us when we go to our respective countries to do what we can, you know, to make the world barrier-free, more accessible, so that everyone can feel accepted and included in the society. Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Just a follow-up question, and Christy, this is for you also. People that use wheelchairs a lot of times are just given wheelchairs, and there's not a lot of thought about seating and positioning. And can you speak just briefly about the services around somebody coming in and working with you on which wheelchair you actually need to have?
Yeah, so I'll take that first. So yeah, that is really a challenge. You know, it's not just about donating a wheelchair or giving someone a wheelchair, but it's all about, you know, taking into consideration all those things like, does it have the right sitting cushion? Is it the right size? Now, what about when you're pushing yourself? Because sometimes, you know, these assistive technologies that are just being donated, sometimes they end up worsening your disability because we don't take into consideration all these other aspects. So it's always important that when you are either buying something or you would want to donate, it's always important to consult those people that know how to measure the standards of a wheelchair, like the sizes, the sitting cushion, depending on the user's needs. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, like she already mentioned, measurement actually is very important before you can give someone a wheelchair, because it can actually dislocate your body, your position. Also, for people with disability to, to be able to have right wheelchairs or assistive devices, it's important that they have access to it, like financial access. They should be affordable to them, otherwise then there's no need.
Yeah, funding is a huge issue, isn't it, with all technology for the most part. I appreciate everyone up here. I know we're out of time. Do we have time for a couple questions, or do we need to close the session?
At this point, I beg that we close the session. We'll be able to respond, or rather give you a moment right after lunch by way of, if anyone has a question to that effect, you can note it down, and then we'll be able to send to the particular panelist so that they can be able to respond to the questions. Well, ladies and gentlemen, join me in appreciating the panel before us. So thank you very much, Wilson, Chrissy, Lebohang,